Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Apologies for that intermission. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihar Radha Madhava Kunja Vihar Pijana Pijana Vallabha Dhari Yashodanan Jajana Yashodanandana Prajajanandana Yamuna Tira Yamuna Tira Vanacha Yamuna Tira Vanacha Yamuna Tira Vanacha Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradha Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradha Yashodananda Chajananjana Yashodananda Chajananjana Yamuna Tira Chari Yamuna Tira Chari Yamuna Tira Vanna Chari Yamuna Tira Vanna Chari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Damodara Radha Damodara Sri Radhe Radha Damodara Radha Damodara Sri Radhe Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada. The devotees, tell me if my audio is not audible. I'm trying a different setting today.
You're audible.
Thanks, Prabhu. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Canto 7, The Signs of God, Chapter 13, The Behavior of a Perfect Person, Chapter, and text number 5. So 7, 13, 5. Narayana Namaskritam.
Hare
Yes,
Krishna.
Prabhu. Prabhu.
We have not yet read the summary, nor have we covered the first 4 texts.
Oh, right. I forgot about that. Sorry. Thanks, Prabhu. tunnel vision got the better of me. So we're beginning a new chapter. Yes, the behavior of a perfect person. Narayanam namaskritam naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudirayet nashta prayeshva badreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavatutam ashloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. So we'll read the chapter summary and we'll go up until text 5 where we encounter the first purport. Chapter 13, the behavior of a perfect person. The 13th chapter describes the regulative principles for sannyasis and also describes the history of an avadhuta. It concludes with the description of perfection for the student and spiritual advancement. Sri Narada Muni has been describing the symptoms of various ashrams and varnas. Now, in this chapter, he specifically describes the regulative principles to be followed by sannyasis. After retiring from family life, one should accept the status of vanaprastha, in which he must formally accept the body as his means of existence, but gradually forget the bodily necessities of life. After vanaprastha life, having left home, one should travel to different places as a sannyasi, without bodily comforts and free from dependence on anyone with respect to bodily necessities. One should travel everywhere, wearing almost nothing and actually walking naked. Without association with ordinary human society, one should beg alms and always be satisfied in himself. One should be a friend to every living entity and be very peaceful in Krishna consciousness. A sannyasi should travel alone in this way, not caring for life or death, waiting for the time when he will leave his material body. He should not indulge in unnecessary books or adopt professions like astrology, nor should he try to become a great orator. He should also give up the path of unnecessary argument and should not depend on anyone under any circumstances. He should not try to allure people into becoming his disciples, just so that the number of his disciples may increase. He should give up the habit of reading many books as a means of livelihood, and he should not attempt to increase the number of temples and maths or monasteries. When a sannyasi thus becomes completely independent, peaceful, equipoised, he can select the destination he desires after death and follow the principles by which to reach that destination. Although fully learned, he should always remain silent, like a dumb person, and travel like a restless child. In this regard, Narada Muni described a meeting between Prahlad and a saintly person who had adopted the mode of life of a python. In this way, he describes the symptoms of a Paramahansa. A person who has attained the Paramahansa stage knows very well the distinction between matter and spirit. He is not at all interested in gratifying the material senses, for he is always deriving pleasure from devotional service to the Lord. He is not very anxious to protect his material body. Being satisfied with whatever he attains by the grace of the Lord, he is completely independent of material happiness and distress, and thus he is transcendental to all regulative principles. Sometimes he accepts severe austerities, and sometimes he accepts material opulence. His only concern is to satisfy Krishna, and for that purpose, he can do anything and everything without reference to the regulative principles. He is never to be equated with materialistic men, nor is he subject to the judgments of such men. Text 1. Srinaruvacha kalpastvevam parivajya dehamatra vasheshitaha gramaikaratravdina nirapekshas charen mahim. Translation. Sri Narada Muni said, A person able to cultivate spiritual knowledge should renounce all material connections and merely keeping the body inhabitable. He should travel from one place to another, passing only one night in each village. In this way, without dependence in regard to the needs of the body, the sannyasi should travel all over the world. Text 2. Vibriyadyaso vasaha kopina cha param. Excuse me. Vibriyadyaso vasa kopina cha param tyaktam na linga dandadir anyat kinchit anapadi. Translation. A person in the renounced mode of life may try to avoid even a dress to cover himself. If he wears anything at all, it should be only a loincloth. And when there is no necessity, a sannyasi should not even accept a danda. A sannyasi should avoid carrying anything but a danda and kamandalu. Text 3. Eka eva charit bhikshur atma ramo pashrayah sarvabhuta suhrich chanto narayana narayana. Translation. The sannyasi, completely satisfied in the self, should live on alms begged from door to door, not being dependent on any person or any place. He should always be a friendly well-wisher to all living beings and be a peaceful, unalloyed devotee of Narayan. In this way, he should move from one place to another. Text 4. Vashed Atmanyado Vishram Paresarasato Vyaye Atmanam Chaparam Brahma Sarvatra Sarasannaye. Translation. The sannyasi should always try to see the Supreme pervading everything and see everything, including this universe, resting on the Supreme. Supti Prabodhayo Sandav Atmano Gatim Atmadrik Pashyan Bandam Chamuksham Cha Maya Matram Navastutaha. Supti Prabodhayo Sandav Atmano Gatim Atmadrik Pashyan Bandam Chamuksham Cha Maya Matram Navastutaha. Would anyone like to try to read the verse?
Supti prabodhayo sandhav atmano gattimatmadrik pashyan bandham cha moksham cha maya matram navastutaha.
Thank you, Prabhu. Anyone else? Supti in the state of unconsciousness, Prabodhayoho, and in the state of consciousness, Sandha in the state of marginal existence, Atmanaha of oneself, Gatim the movement, Atmadrik one who can actually see the self, Pashyan always trying to see or understand, Bandham the conditional state of life, Cha and Moksham the liberated state of life. Cha also. Maya matram only illusion. Na not. Vastutaha fact. Translation. During unconsciousness and consciousness, and between the two, he should try to understand the self and be fully situated in the self. In this way, he should realize that the conditional and liberated stages of life are only illusory and not actually factual. With such a high understanding, you should see only the absolute truth, pervading everything. Purport. By Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The unconscious state is nothing but ignorance, darkness, or material existence. And in the conscious state, one is awake. The marginal state between consciousness and unconsciousness has no permanent existence. Therefore, one who is advanced in understanding the self should understand that consciousness and unconsciousness are but illusions, for they fundamentally do not exist. Only the Supreme Absolute Truth exists, as confirmed by the Lord in Bhagavad Gita 9:4. Maya tatam idam sarvam jagata vyaktamurtina matsthani sarva bhutani nachaham teshav astitaha. By me, in my unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. All beings are in me, but I am not in them. End quote. Everything exists on the basis of Krishna's impersonal feature. Nothing can exist without Krishna. Therefore, the advanced devotee of Krishna can see the Lord everywhere without illusion. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunditam Nina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunari Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadara Srivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Sukti Prabodhayo Sandha Atmanogati Atmadrik Pashyan Bandham Chamuksham Cha Maya Matram Vastutaha. During unconsciousness and consciousness, and between the two, he should try to understand the self and be fully situated in the self. In this way, he should realize that the conditional and liberated stages of life are only illusory and not actually factual. With such a high understanding, he should see only the absolute truth pervading everything. So here is the culmination. This chapter describes the culmination of instructions by Narada Muni to Yudhishthira Maharaj. So you may recall, after Narada Muni described the pastimes of Prahlad and Lord Nrsingadev, following a question from Yudhishthira Maharaj, that he couldn't believe that at the Rajasuya sacrifice, Shishupal had merged into the body of Krishna. Yeah. And so it brought into question, it made the benevolence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead into question. How is it that a demon so envious to the Supreme Lord could actually attain Sayuja Mukti, merging into the body of the Lord? It just didn't seem, it made the Lord appear to be partial. So that was the issue. The issue was, is the Lord partial or impartial? Right? And so this was a question that Yudhishthira Maharaj had put forth to Narada Muni. He described the pastime of Lord Nrsingadev and Prahlad. And so then, following from that, just the greatness of the pure devotion of Prahlad, Yudhishthira Maharaj was inspired to ask the question, how then can we actually become? And basically, the essence of the question is, now how can we move towards living like Prahlad? And because he's a monarch, Narada Muni began his instruction by describing the perfect society. So, describing the Varnashram Dharma, And in the perfect society, everybody actually has an opportunity to cultivate the consciousness of Prahlad Maharaj. So that was the essence of the previous chapter. And then um, here is a description of how to actually live like a perfect person. And that is the order of sannyas. And in the chapter summary, the mood of a sannyasi is that he hides his glory. So even though he is learned in all the scriptures, he lives, although fully learned, he should always remain silent like a dumb person and travel like a restless child. And we know the example is Prahlad. It is the four Kumaras, the state of living like a child, appearing like everybody to be a child. It's very beneficial for cultivating the state of consciousness. So we come into this world um, in the body of a child. And so when you exit also like a child. And so instead of capitulating, not capitulating, but more like being predominated by the influence of old age, you preemptively take sannyas and you depend on the Lord. And so instead of being bent into the position of a child and struggling under the pressure of old age, you start behaving like a child preemptively. And in this way, you can actually use old age or advanced age for the cultivation of this consciousness, like Prahlad Maharaj. So, yeah, in the first four verses of this, Narada Muni is describing the actual activities, what you do. So, traveling, you don't spend too long in one place. You keep moving. So, as the proverb goes, a rolling stone never gathers any moss. And so, you just keep traveling. And so, in this way, you're not affected by the modes of a particular place. And without dependence in regard to the needs of the body, the sannyasi should travel all over the world. So this constant traveling, you're just forced to depend on the Lord. And this position of being forced to depend on the Lord, then you actually see how the Lord is maintaining it. So what we read about in text 5 is it's the verse that Prabhupada quoted, right? Matstani sarvabhutani nachaham deshravastitaha. Right? So how everything, this entire universe, how all beings are in Krishna, but he's not in them. So all these activities that Narada Muni is saying the sannyasi should do actually forces you to cultivate this consciousness. So it's like an occupation. So you basically are trying to achieve a certain objective, and those constraints get you to move in a certain direction. So you're applying the constraints. So these rules and regulations of sannyas apply constraints, just like the body of a child, it has constraints, right? And those constraints, you move in a certain direction. So that's the idea with applying these constraints. And so the direction you move towards is complete dependence on the Lord. That, okay, you don't know when your next meal is going to come. You don't know where you're going to sleep. And so, but you still get a good night's rest. You still get food. So somehow, yeah, you get maintained. Yeah, and so this is the cultivation. Text 3 as well talks about now how do this rule and regulation of your dress, you become oblivious to other people, what society will say about you. So classic sannyasis, you basically just even wear just a loincloth and you don't carry anything but a danda and kamandali. So this is part of giving up the honor, becoming free from the honor and dishonor of mainstream society. And then text 4 describes, yes, sannyasi completely dissatisfied in the self should live on alms begged from door to door, not being dependent on any person or any place. He should always be a friendly well-wisher to all living beings and be peaceful and alert. So this business of appearing before people to be a beggar, and whether you're cursed or whether you're accepted, whether people recognize your position, if somebody who's actually learned it. So here's a saintly person who's come to beg alms from me. So somebody may be educated, a householder may be educated and accept you in that way. Or somebody may be ignorant of your person and reject you and say, you're just a parasite living on uh, the sweat of others, living on the sweat of householders. Throughout all that, you remain equipoised. And the mood is that you should always be friendly, be a friendly well-wisher to all living beings, and you should be peaceful, whether you accept it or you reject it. In this way, he should move from one place to another. So it's unpredictable. Yeah. So the advantage of staying in one place is that you get to know the people, they get to know you, and a certain level of acceptance gets developed from both parties. By you getting to know the other people, the movements, what makes them tick, their buttons, and so in this way, you apply some natural uh, level of diplomacy when dealing with people, so that you can just stay on the good side, and also vice versa in them developing acceptance towards you is that okay, this person, this is the kind of life that they've chosen. In the beginning we couldn't understand it, now we have some appreciation, right? So that's the advantage of staying in one place. But here the regulative principle is that for a sannyasi they keep moving, so even that comfort of social acceptance, they can't depend on that for their maintenance. No, they just depend completely and exclusively on the super soul. So if the super soul sends influences a living entity to give them food, to give them shelter, give them a pillow where they can rest for the night, they'll do it. If not, fine. The sannyasi stays focused and stays peaceful, and stays and has a friendly disposition towards the Supreme Lord, not blaming him, and not being attached to the comfort of the body. So again, these regulative principles culminate in what we just read in today's verse, is really to maintain the focus. And the focus here is to see the duality of consciousness and unconsciousness as illusory. And so here, Prabhupada, it's a pretty advanced state of consciousness. Yeah, this what's being described in today's verse. The unconscious, Prabhupada writes, the unconscious state is nothing but ignorance or darkness or material existence. And in the conscious state, one is awake. The marginal state between consciousness and unconsciousness has no permanent existence. Therefore, one who is advanced in understanding the self should understand that unconsciousness and consciousness are but illusions, and they fundamentally do not exist. So we may recall the example. I think it's given in the Brahma Vimohana Lila, the prayers by Brahma to Krishna, that for residents of the sun planet, so for people who live off the sun planet, like ourselves, we live on the earth planet, and our planet is resting in the sunshine. So for us, there is a concept of light and dark, right? Because the earth rotates, we experience darkness. 12 hours, the earth rotates again, we experience light. But for people, for the residents of the sun planet, it's always light. And so for them, this duality of light and darkness is actually illusory. It doesn't exist. It's just, this is how it is for us. It's always light. Yes. So similarly, consciousness is a state of darkness. And then, so you're asleep, for example. And then when you're in a conscious state, you're awake. So now for the sannyasi who's cultivated this consciousness, if you think about it, it's true, actually. It's illusory because the subtle body is still active. So the gross body may be asleep, but the subtle body is still active. And if you are if you are adept, you can do astral body projection, and you can have activities even while the physical body is resting, and you can remember those activities. So during the nighttime, we do dream, but for the sannyasi who's advanced in this consciousness, they always remain active. Yeah, and so when they're asleep, and if they are Paramahansa, they can actually be participating, not just even doing activities with the material subtle body, but the Swarup. So they can actually be participating in the spiritual world in their ontological form, and they can actually be rendering service. So uh, this is it here, right? So this is the advanced, like really topmost consciousness. And then Prabhupada here, he's describing different levels of unconscious states, right? So we just described for the physical body, right? But now you can even take it further for ignorance and awakeness, right? So ignorance, one could say the mode of goodness is the opposite uh, ignorance. So when you're awake um, and you have some level of awareness of the modes of material nature, that state of consciousness of being in the mode of goodness, right? And the state of consciousness of being in the mode of ignorance is also illusory because it pertains to material nature. So, in material nature, you as a spirit soul, you're separate from it. So that state of consciousness, you don't identify with it. So one could say, oh well, yes, the conscious state of being awake, I'll base that as being the basis of the truth, right? But for the advanced sannyasis, that they can also see that the material mode of goodness, being awake in the material mode of goodness, it's also just it's just wet stool. I mean, sorry, it's just dry stool, right? So whether something is wet, whether a stool is wet or it's dry, it's still stool. It's still materialistic. And so there's no real difference because you're going to actually accept another material body. So then, okay, suppose I become awake to the need to give up material activities, right? Uh, like um, like a Tyagi or even a Mayavadi or a Buddhist. Suppose I enter that state of consciousness. where I see that, okay, I'm going to be awake to that and say that my self-interest is in giving up material activities. And so I'm going to go for Sayuja Mukti, merging into the Brahmin effulgence, or Nirvana, going out of the forest, whatever. Even that, for the advanced sannyasi, according to Narada Muni here, it's actually illusory. That the Sayuja Mukti, it's actually illusory. Why? Because the advanced sannyasi can see that there's a supreme absolute truth and there's a spirit soul. They never merge. There's no question of merging. There's only a relationship, an eternal relationship. So the idea that I've merged into the sunshine, into the sun, it's illusory. Yeah. And Prabhupada describes it in the Bhagavad Gita 9.4 that he even states, he said, yeah, this is a crude example, but the idea that, okay, the White House, for example, and the military, right? Or the government departments, education, the military is one government department, right? So one could say that, and the influence of the White House is just spread everywhere. So in different governmental departments, the Treasury, agriculture, there's just all sorts of departments. But to say that, okay, they're actually one, it's illusory. Yeah. Or you can even take it a step further to say that the bigger department, like the biggest department that the government spends its money on, which is the military, that the military is actually bigger than the White House or the government that runs the military. Even that idea is illusory. So just like to say that the universe is, because it's bigger, more intricate, it's superior to Krishna. This idea is illusory. And so this is the consciousness. And therefore to then say Sayuja Mukti, or the idea of liberation as the topmost idea of liberation as merging into the gigantic portion of the absolute truth, saying that it has to be the separated energy of the Lord, the all-pervasive aspect. So in other words, the Vasudev portion of Bhagavan is superior to Bhagavan. This idea is actually illusory. Yeah. And so this is what the sannyasi is seeing, is that people who define a concept of liberation, mukti, sayuja mukti in particular, it's illusory. They can never merge, and the Brahma Jyoti or Brahman, envisioning the absolute truth as the all-pervasive aspect of the absolute truth as being, that is the pivotal aspect of the absolute truth, as that's the target for liberation, that's illusory. Because what they've done is that they have thought that the separated energy has, now that it's become separate and it's all pervasive, now it's actually superior to the source from which it's emanated from. Rupa Goswami gives us a very fascinating description in the Nectar of Devotion that the Brahma Jyoti is the effulgence of the toes of Krishna. That's its position. That's its relationship to the Supreme Lord. It's the toes of the Lord. It's the effulgence of his toenails. Yeah. So the Vaishnava sannyasi, or the sannyasi according to Narada Muni, who's advanced, this is what they see. That yes, actually I'm never entangled. I'm always liberated. And so if I'm always liberated, the three modes of material nature never affect me. Therefore, this idea of liberation, it's illusory. This is a very high level of consciousness. Yes, and so this is what is being described in today's verse, is that when you're situated completely in your ontological position, uh, these, you just see dual states, right? Dual states, consciousness, unconsciousness. There's the material side of it, which is illusory. There's even on the subtle side of it, subtle energy, that's illusory. And even on the uh, concept of liberation, it's also illusory. It doesn't pertain to the ontological relationship between me as a spirit soul and so me as a jivatma and the paramatma. We are never one. The position is that I have an individual relationship with the Paramatma. And the Paramatma, right, is an expansion of Bhagavan. Yeah, so even though the Paramatma seems to have more influence, because Paramatma spread everywhere, but actually it's an emanation from Bhagavan. There is one Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he has a form. And so that form is still superior to the form of the Paramatma because there's one original candle. So this is described in by Lord Brahma that yes, so even though uh, the he saw the Paramatma he saw when Krishna had expanded into many cowherd boys, he could see that all of them were Vishnu Murtis. So he could see many, right? But he could understand that, yes, even though these are expansions, these are not different from this 5-year-old cowherd boy whom I had doubt that is actually my Supreme Lord. He could see very clearly that these Vishnumurtis are coming from this 5-year-old cowherd boy who just has in his hand, he just has fruit salad mixed with yogurt. And that's my Lord. So this was the shocking truth. Yeah, this was the shocking revelation. How is it that a 5-year-old boy with just fruit salad in his hand is walking around looking for calves? This is my Supreme Lord. So he could see it very clearly. So I was like, oh my, these Vishnumurtis, these cowherd boys are actually Vishnumurtis, and these Vishnumurtis came from this 5-year-old cowherd boy. That is Ishvara Paramakrishna, Sachidananda Vigraha, Anadir Adir Govinda Sarvakaranam Karan. So he could see, yes, this is the supreme cause of all causes. This is what he likes to do. Just eat fruit salad and look for calves in the forest as a 5-year-old boy. So yes, so I wanted to read from a bit from the chapter 18, but we run out of time. So chapter 18 of the Bhagavad Gita, you can read from text 1 to text 5, yeah, text 6. And Krishna, he describes like um, why acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance are not to be given up. So even though the sannyasi is given up all sorts of things, but what is not to be given up? It's these acts of sacrifice, because even these acts, they also purify the great souls. This is Krishna's opinion. And Krishna's opinion is Dharma. Yes. It's that important. It's pivotal. And so for the sannyasi who sees everything as being an emanation from Krishna, he sees the Supreme Lord, all living entities. He sees his means of livelihood. He sees time. He saw his relatives. He might have even been married. He might have had a really good job, or like good occupation, very successful. He sees everything, his entire life. He can see it as resting in the body of the Lord. But he also sees that the Lord, Bhagavan Sri Krishna, wasn't in all those things. So he could see the all-pervasive aspect of the Lord, but he can also see that Bhagavan Sri Krishna was also here, like he was separate. So you visit him at the temple, doing some puja, he could see that, yes, uh, that was just an expand, the pervasive aspect of the Lord. And even though and now that he's come to the state of sannyas, he's given up all sorts of things as we described. But the one thing he doesn't give up is the act of sacrifice, charity, and penance. And later on in this chapter, you'll hear the kind of charity that sannyas is engaged in. For example, if he gets some wealth, the sannyasi, he will then use that wealth to build temples and give shelter to souls that are serious about spiritual life. Yeah. So that's how he uses, that's how he does charity. And then the penance is the austerities of traveling everywhere and only depending, uh, on the livelihood for his livelihood from strangers, people he hardly knows, and he doesn't stay there for more than 3 days, and he engages in, other sacrifices, but the primary sacrifice that actually purifies even him is to chant Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So even when you come to this advanced state of life or sannyas, there's still trace amounts of ego. So the false ego is the last element that gets dissolved. And it's even described that even up to the stage of bhava, right? So the stage before full Krishna prema, there's trace amounts, of ego. And the Bhagavatam example is Maharaj Bharat, that even though he had given up the earth in his mid-20s, that's how much power he had, influence, opulence, completely opulent, and yet he gave it up at such a young age. And he was showing all the, 8 transformations of ecstasy. It was very advanced. And yet, the ego of being a caretaker, he couldn't give it up. And therefore, he couldn't see how the Lord was going to care for an orphaned deer. And so he took it upon himself to adopt this deer. And so that then opened up a Pandora's box for him. So, yes. And so chanting this Hare Krishna, it's the activity. And even for the pure devotees, right? So even for those great souls, even for them, they also chant, because it's just so nice. They spend quality time with the Supreme Lord. Yes. So I would like to invite all of you, dear devotees, if we could today, we can read chapter 8 of Lilamrita, volume 1, New Delhi, Crying Alone in the Wilderness. And this is a very, wonderful example in Prabhupada's life when he took sannyas, and his consciousness leading up to that, what happened as well, how he was struggling in Jhansi with the League of Devotees, and what his state of consciousness is. You see it very clearly how what Narada Muni is describing in this verse, Prabhupada, he demonstrated it. To actually see the Lord in everything, understanding that Matstani Sarvabhutani Nachaham Deshava Vastitaha. Deshravastitaha. So by Krishna, in Krishna's unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. My entire life. So we might not have the instruments to see the entire universe, but we certainly have the memory and we have the experience to see our entire lives. And therefore we can see how Krishna has been pervading right from day one. And therefore conclude that every single aspect in my life isn't Krishna, but Krishna, Bhagavan Sri Krishna, wasn't in those aspects. His expansions, his separated expansion, primarily the Paramatma feature, the Super Soul. Now we've come to now in this life, or in this stage of our life, we're able to recognize the difference. And therefore we dedicate ourselves fully to Krishna, serving Krishna, dedicating all that we do as an offering to Krishna. So, yeah, so this chapter 8 of New Delhi, Crying Alone in the Wilderness, we can read this chapter and see that, yes, at any stage of life, and pray to the Lord and pray to Radha Damodar, be inspired that, yes, my Lord, at every stage, any stage of my life, I can cultivate this consciousness of a perfect person. This consciousness is not dependent by what type of body you have, by what occupation you're occupying, by the amount of health that you have destined for your body, or the lack thereof. Simply, you cultivate it. It's internal, it's very deep. And so, yes, we can pray to Radha Damodar to make strides towards cultivating this consciousness of seeing unconsciousness and consciousness, and between the two, understanding them to actually be illusory. And the real situation is that I'm an eternal servant of the Lord. So I'm the servant of the servant, and the Supreme Lord is the Supreme Lord, and I just want to serve the Lord. That's the only, that's the basis of reality. Hare Krishna. Are there any questions, reflections, or contentions?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yeah, I hesitate to jump in. I'm always hoping, someone else will have a question or a comment. I don't want to dominate the classes every day. I wait a while until it gets too uncomfortable for me. I I can't tolerate dead air. I have to fill it, with some Krishna Katha.
Right.
I want to thank you for a nice class, at least as much of it as I was able to understand. Sometimes devotees ask me, sometimes you don't comment in Srimad Bhagavatam class. Why is that? And there are several reasons. One is that sometimes I'm just not well enough to do it. Sometimes I genuinely have nothing to say. and sometimes I'm reluctant to say anything because I was unable to understand the class, and I just don't know what was said. I can't actually hear class. I read captions. Zoom provides captions, so I read the captions. But there are some devotees who have an accent, and the captioning facility has difficulty to understand their accent. And
Mm,
so when I'm reading the captions, I get absolute gibberish.
mm.
And so I don't know how to respond to that. So often it's the same devotees every time that I tend not to comment because I have no idea what they said. Today, I surmise that there is something wrong with your voice because the closed captioning is um, not as clear as it usually is.
Mm.
But perhaps I'm
It might
wrong.
be it might be this new setting I'm using. I tried a new it's personalized audio isolation, and I'm also using headphones
Oh,
today. So yeah, so I think that's the cause.
yeah. For
Yeah.
some reason today, your voice seems not as strong as usual.
Mm.
Anyway,
Sorry about that.
I have some questions based upon the translation and purport, if you have the time.
Uh, I do need to go and I guess I can push it until 8:15.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
one is that Narada Muni here is giving a brief synopsis, a summary of the Varnas and ashrams, and not going into exhaustive detail, which would imply that it's what's being discussed is not his central point, that he has something, a bigger point to convey, and that he will get to that shortly. Would you like to venture a guess as to what it is that Narada Muni is going to present primarily?
Uh, I mean, I I don't remember. Uh, I mean, the summary I gave from where like the whole discourse began. For me, it just seems like he's just stressing pure devotion. So his audience is Yudhishthira Maharaj, and he's speaking Varnashram in a summarized way, because uh, his audience understands the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna describes it in detail in the last chapter, chapter 18. And even here, in terms of his description of sannyas, he's given details which Krishna didn't give. So on that basis, uh, yeah, his description, it seems to be slightly different. Um, but in terms of from what I've understood, like this whole discourse, the essence is to stress on the characteristics, like how to actually walk in the footsteps of Prahlad Maharaj.
I'll accept it.
Okay.
On the whole, Srimad Bhagavatam is it's on an entirely different level than so many other shastras.
Mm.
You can find in other scripture more detailed prescriptions for the different ashrams, much more detailed. Um, but Srimad Bhagavatam doesn't go into great detail about a great many things. It focuses on Krishna and pure devotional service. Um, I have another question. I hope it won't take you too long, but it's a simple question. Here in the purport, Srila Prabhupada makes reference to Bhagavad Gita chapter 9, text 4. Maya tatamidam sarvam jagad avyaktamurtina matstani sarvabhutani na chaham teshvavastitaha. By me, in my unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. All beings are in me, but I am not in them. Yet, in chapter 15, text 15, Krishna says, Sarasya Janam Hridi Sani Vishto Matasmritara Ganam Apohanam Cha Vedaishya Sarvar Aham Eva Vedyo Vedanta Krid Veda Vid Eva Chaham. I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. By all the Vedas am I to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas. So, on the one hand, he says, all beings are in me, but I am not in them. And then he says, but I'm in the heart of everyone. So how do we reconcile this apparent dichotomy?
You reconcile this dichotomy by understanding the science of avatars. So the Lord, he creates expansions. And so he can make the claim, I'm both the same and I'm also different. So the difference comes in, the way we reconcile is in manifested opulence. So Rupa Goswami he explains it that they differentiate the different avatars based on the degree of manifested qualities. And Rupa Goswami gives 64 qualities, categories of qualities, and each quality is as deep as the ocean. And the different avatars, they manifest those qualities accordingly. So here, when he says, in this verse, Matsthani Sarvabhutani Chaham Teshwavastitaha, that all beings are in him, right? In him, but he's not in them. So this is a Chinta Beta Beta Tattva, that they are in his universal form, but they are not in Bhagavan Sri Krishna. Right? So the 5-year-old little boy that was looking for the calves, he was just genuinely looking for his lost calves. But the beings that were in him, they're in his universal. And so the cowherd boys that he had expanded, they are in that aspect of the absolute truth. These are Vishnu Murtis. But Mother Yashoda's little boy is Bhagavan Sri Krishna, and yeah, he's separate. Sometimes, his opulences show up. The acharyas describe that, okay, sometimes the opulences are like doing some battle, and so they want to also participate in the pastime. My Guru Maharaj was citing this, and so when Mother Yashoda saw the universal form, the universe in her little boy's mouth, yes, the opulence of Shashti, yeah, like the opulence of Aishwarya was wanting to participate in this pastime, and so he manifested that. But ordinarily, when she looks down there, she doesn't see, that. So I hope that answers your question, Prabhu. Or does it answer your question?
I will accept it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Anything from anyone? Corey? We were discussing, or maybe in Jagannath Pandit Prabhu, we were discussing this point at last night's program at the BYC. I don't know if you've thought about it, had a chance to think about this. It's quite a blockbuster point, actually, that consciousness and unconsciousness is illusory.
Prabhu, it is completely derailing my meditation on perfection.
That's what Narada Muni does. Yeah, This perfection is very deep, yeah, and he just keeps us. Narada Muni, being the spiritual master of so many famous pure devotees, uh, and all over the universe, and therefore, he's not only a spiritual master in the earthly realm, but also the higher realms, the spiritual world, the heavenly planets, and also is regarded as a spiritual master in the hellish planets because he is the spiritual master of um, Prahlad. But even the demons just have respect for him because they see him as being impartial. Um, so he's the spiritual master of the entire universe. And so when he speaks, yes, he disabuses our conceptions of what we thought was the thing to go for, right? Um, so yes, so it's a sutra. We can't understand it superficially. We're forced to go deep. Any other thoughts from anyone? Thank you, dear devotees, for participating in this morning's Bhagavatam class and giving me association. I hope I was able to say something of benefit, and let us pray to Radha Damodar today to cultivate this consciousness and see how he has been in all aspects of our life. And now that we are seeing him as a Bhagavan Shri Krishna in his Archa Vigraha, in his deity form, now that we have a relationship with him, please, my Lord, help me cultivate this exclusive focus, devotion, and dependence on you. Kantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Gaura Pramanandi Haribo.